Sunrise is F.W. Murnau's first film in the context of a Hollywood production, as opposed to the cinema of Weimar Germany that he had left behind in 1927. Having established himself with a hugely acclaimed The Last Laugh and with his epic Faust in production, Murnau was a hot property sought by William Fox, the producer of Fox Films. Fox saw Murnau as his ticket to win his brand prestige in the newly established Academy Awards. By this metric, Sunrise was a success, winning 3 Oscars, including one for being a unique and artistic picture, as good a description of the film as any. Commercially, though, it was not the hit that Fox was after, partially because Warner Brothers' first talkie, The Jazz Singer, was cleaning up at the box office and signalling the demise of the silent era. This was to impact on the control Murnau was to have over the release of his subsequent and also brilliant City Girl. Fox Studios would also soon falter, needing to merge with 20th Century Pictures in 1931, the year, incidentally, of Murnau's death. Sunrise thus sits in the middle of a Venn diagram of converging contexts. The characteristic artistry of Murnau himself informs its cinematography, lighting, mise-en-scène and actor blocking. Some of the themes and motifs that are associated with German expressionist cinema are in evidence. The modernism of 1920s America and the sentimentalism and characteristics of Hollywood melodrama are also notable. Finally, should we consider Sunrise to be a very late silent film, or an early step into the new era of sound cinema? Although many of the Weimar filmmakers we identify today as expressionistic would have balked at the suggestion that their films were part of a particular movement, 1920s German cinema was famed for its elaborate use of mise-en-scène and decorative lighting used to express the inner anxiety and dark themes of haunted or traumatized characters. Additionally, performance was often highly stylized so as to reflect the extremes of emotion, such as hysteria. The doppelganger was a prevalent motif, a duality of character that often serves as a vehicle to explore psychological turmoil. It symbolized a split in identity, often representing the battle between good and evil, the conscious and unconscious mind, or the schism between social order and chaos. Often simplified as a Jekyll and Hyde archetype, the doppelganger illustrated a protagonist's internal conflict as a victim of the uncertainties and disillusionment prevalent in post-war Germany. The country was grappling with economic instability, political unrest, and a search for identity. These themes were echoed in the doppelganger narratives, emphasizing the fractured nature of the society and individuals living in it. After the Wall Street crash, this figure would find an American home via the universal horrors of the 1930s, but in 1927 the USA was oblivious to this impending catastrophe. For now, this was the Roaring Twenties and the age of Fordism. Thus the main character's angst in Sunrise is grappled with successfully, and the man earns his redemption and reconciliation. If the film had been produced back at UFA Studios in Berlin, the resolution might have seen the wife drowned, the city woman dead from strangulation, and the man transferred to an asylum. As it is, the Hollywood ending of Sunrise positions it as closer to the popular melodramas of the day. In Sunrise, the man expresses his duality through Murnau's play of binary opposites that pull him in different directions: day, night, rural, urban, domesticity, sexual adventure. Early in the film, a brief flashback juxtaposes these two sides of his psyche. By day, a happy working father. By night, a dour loser. The man shifts from being haunted, hunched, heavily made up, and with weights in his boots to give him a lumbering walk in the first third of the film, to a lighter, happier, redeemed character later. In the early scenes where his conscience is troubled, the man is haunted by multiple exposed images of the city woman's temptress caresses. She whistles to him to leave the domestic sphere in a scene that is surely borrowed from Karl Gruner's 1923 film The Street, where a husband follows the siren call of adventures on the street as his wife lays the table for dinner. Later, the happily reunited man and wife are blessed with visions of angels in an entirely different compound shot. The respective women are also coded as traditional, modern, servile, independent, innocent, experienced. In short, the wife is the patriarchal ideal, and the city woman a liberated flapper. Men were very much in control of the movies, and the independent woman was typically coded as a femme fatale. Note the disdainful looks that pass between the older couple who are hosting the city woman as she prepares to go out. Also in this shot, note the typical Murnau device where the logic of the set comes a distant second to the composition, with a table that would surely spill the soup of anyone trying to eat off it. Murnau had a characteristic approach to the camera, called Unchained by the critic Lotte Eisner, that utilised highly mobile, elaborate tracking shots and inventive composition that used the set to frame characters at unusual angles in order to reflect their thoughts or feelings. The brilliance of Murnau's cinematography is most evident during the marsh sequence, which features elaborate use of tracking and panning camera. As the man trudges across the marsh, the surroundings become increasingly enclosed, reflecting his internal struggle. The set overall has surely deliberate similarities and connotations with the scene in Murnau's Faust, where the titular character meets the devil in the moonlight. The camera itself behaves as a character, a silent but nosy witness to the man's transgressions, and incidentally inspiring a key technique that would be later adopted by the Murnau fan Alfred Hitchcock. It is we, the spectators, who are dragged through a hedge for a closer peep into this illicit behaviour. As a setting, the marsh is associated with ambiguity. It becomes a liminal space between land and water, representing the blurred lines between good and evil, temptation and redemption. It serves as a metaphor for the moral quagmire that the straying husband finds himself in, desolate, an uncertain space where he grapples with the consequences of his actions. Logically, it is a nonsensical place for the city woman to meet him for their love-making. Note her staggering through the mud in her heels. Emotionally, though, it is hugely appropriate. The prioritisation of emotion and visual impact over strict narrative logic is yet another characteristic of several films considered as contemporary German expressionist. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or Metropolis, even Nosferatu, may be classics, but their plots are riddled with holes and contradictions. We then shift to the elaborate montage sequence with the overlapping soundtracks, distorted perspective and compound images that equally suggest that the city has a character of its own, tempting, exhilarating and modern. We hear a cacophony of city sounds over distorted, overlapping images of a stylized cityscape, notably different from the enormous, elaborate, yet ostensibly realist-seeming set of the actual city later in the film. Note the simultaneous use of the sound of the jazz band with the film's non-diegetic soundtrack, giving a woozy effect as the Vaseline-smeared images and unnerving rotating camera overlap in a way that is more hellish than exciting. The sequence uses all available aspects of film form here, effectively throwing the kitchen sink at both the man and the viewer. As an odd aside, the lure of dancing and jazz is completely lost on the man when the real thing is on offer later. Though his wife seems keen, he is more interested in the fun of the fair and the piglets. It seems that he's a country boy at heart when he's happy. In contrast, the sequence where the couple reconcile in the church is also expressed as much through the dramatic chiaroscuro shafts of light as the performance. The mise-en-scène suggesting a holy place of forgiveness and redemption. The synchronous use of the sound of bells completes the picture of bliss. While the couple's silent tears are understated and restrained, outside they wander through a back projection of a bucolic meadow, into a sudden comic turn to a busy street with another burst of cacophonous sound, including human voices. For a split second, one of them is even synchronized to an angry driver picked out in a close shot. In the later sequence, where the man fears that his wife has drowned, we see carefully composed shots of him frantically searching in a rowing boat, calling her name. One in particular shifts from being a medium long shot to a close-up of the man's mouth, emphasizing his growing panic. The camera hasn't actually moved, just allowing the flow of action to come towards it. We cut away to beautifully composed shots of the wife's bundle of reeds breaking apart and floating away in a jagged line, symbolising fading hope of her survival. Sidelighting enhances the mood of an anxious search in the water at night. Meanwhile, the woman from the city hides in a tree like a snake silently waiting. The branches form a jagged vignette around the edge of the frame to characterise her sinister plotting that has led to this moment. The deep focus and patches of light from the search party's torches make full use of detail and shadows in the composition. The use of mise-en-scène and lighting as a visual and symbolic extension of a character's state of mind is a particularly strong feature of Weimar Expressionism, and the careful composition that uses the set and props as a vignetting device is very typical of Murnau in particular. The sparsity of reported dialogue in the film after the early scenes is striking. Murnau relies on the expressive power of visuals and the actor's performance to convey the intensity of the character's emotions. The man's internal struggle, guilt and remorse are palpable through his gestures and facial expressions. Shots of the characters mouthing dialogue are rare, and Janet Gaynor, who plays the wife, expresses a wide range of emotions while barely seeming to actually say a word. Still, the critical consensus regarding Hollywood drama generally idealised what was then considered naturalism in performance. so the acting in Murnau's American period is more subtle than we might see in his German films. The first Academy Awards panel gave Gaynor the Best Actress Oscar, suggesting that contemporary critics at least considered that the film was notable and at home in Hollywood, while some sniffed at the artistry of the film in what was considered a popular medium. 100 years later, little has changed. In short, Murnau's composition, lighting and cinematography collectively provide the film with its stylistic expressionism. The haunting, suggestions of trauma, binary opposition and male anxiety give the film its themes. The general restraint in performance and happy conclusion indicate its Hollywood context. Nevertheless, according to the French critic André Bazin, the very use of the purely visual image in silent cinema is in and of itself expressionistic as opposed to realistic. Much of Hollywood realist cinema was heavily dependent on intertitles to support the visual information with exposition and dialogue, as if waiting for sound to provide the missing element. Murnau, however, uses intertitles sparingly. His earlier work, The Last Laugh, had only used one in the entire film. This is expressionistic in itself, using Bazin's definition, and what Hitchcock would later call pure cinema. In Sunrise, we do not need intertitles to explain much of what is happening. He mostly gets the exposition out of the way early and uses only one over the whole 20 minutes of the final act. On the other hand, Bazin's praise for Murnau's typically long shot duration as an indicator of realism suggests that simple distinctions are elusive. Defining what is and isn't expressionistic remains a game of herding cats. Perhaps we can go with this. Given the production context of a period of social modernisation, at odds with a social conservatism, at the cusp of cinema itself embarking on a massive regeneration, with a singular visionary director at the helm of a big Hollywood melodrama, Sunrise is almost uniquely expressionist realist.